Hi friends, we're here today to talk some more about Autopunch, and this week's theme is monstrous or magical. And whether or not Autopunch is monstrous or magical really depends on you. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, Autopunch can be monstrous if you begin digitizing with poor images, or if you ignore some steps, or if you omit information, or if you just fail to master basic skills. So that's why we backed all the way up to the very beginning. But Autopunch can be magical if you begin with quality images, if you take your time to fill in details, if you master terminology, and if you edit your work. So what do I mean by edit your work? That's kind of a big issue, and that's where a lot of us are falling into trouble because Autopunch is automatic, but there are some parameters that you have control over, and you need to exercise your control. You need to edit what you're doing to get the best results. Now, some of you may be thinking, I don't have the editing software, I only have Autopunch. How am I going to edit my work? Well, edit means to check. And so when you're going back, you want to check your margins on your image. You want to check your image size. You want to check your stitch density and your fill choices. And you want to check your finished design. Even if you don't have editor, the editing software, sometimes you may need to just run a design through Autopunch and see what happens, and then go back and do it again, making a few changes based on what you saw with the first trial. So on your second run through, you can do some revision. That is, you can examine the colors. There's a suggest button, and we'll look at that in just a minute, where Autopunch suggests some colors, but you may want to limit even further. You want to check your image size. Sometimes an image that you begin with is very small or very large, and it's not suitable for changing much. Some of the resolution is lost if you make too big of a change, and that can affect your final outcome. Your stitch types. And Autopunch has hundreds and hundreds of stitch types to choose from. There are catalogs full of styles that you can select. We'll look at that in just a minute also. You may want to examine your color order. You would be surprised at what happens to a design when you simply change the order of the colors, or if you reorganize the design by colors. And we'll look at that. You want to examine your block order, and Autopunch has a feature called Optimize, which you can utilize to help produce the optimum order of your design. And of course you want to check your stitch density and stretch. And one of the things you want to do in examining that is to select the right fabric for your design. And that's a choice that's built into Autopunch. When you choose the right fabric for your design, it helps to prevent those puckers that you sometimes see in a stitched out design. And finally, you want to look at the design with what's called realistic view. Autopunch has a feature that will show you a facsimile of what the design is going to look like when it's stitched out. And so realistic view can help you get a good grip on what you've just done. You might want to go back and make some additional changes based on that view. So basically what happens with Autopunch is it makes all of the process of digitizing easier, but with a maximum of control, because you are the one who's in the driver's seat. You are making all the final decisions. Even though this is computer generated, you can change almost everything that's been done so that you have control over the outcome. And with that control, you can use Autopunch once you learn all the ins and outs to produce professional designs. All right, we're here today to take a look at Autopunch, and we're going to start with a very simple design. Since we've been talking about Wilma's flower this week, I thought we might try that one. So I've opened Autopunch and I'm going to go to Create, and I will click Next, and I will go to my desktop and select that pretty royal blue flower. Click OK, and I'll click Next. And Autopunch has cropped the image right to the very edge, which is good. Some images will not appear this way, and it's important for you to drag these bars as close to the edge of the image as you can and eliminate as much background as possible. So now we're going to take a look at the size of this design, and it looks like it was very small in inches, 1 inch by almost an inch. So this is one of the reasons why we want to choose a vector image, because they don't lose any resolution whether we increase or decrease the size of the image. In this case, we're starting out with a very small image, so if we try to increase the size very much, we may lose a great deal of resolution if this was not a vector image. But I want my flower to be larger than 1 inch, so I'm going to make it about 3. And click Next. Now, when I look at this picture, it looks to be 3 colors. Looks like the center is yellow, the petals are blue, and the outline is black. But if you know anything about computer graphics, then you know that there are many more colors than what our eyes can distinguish. So let's look at Suggest, and Autopunch has actually reduced the number of colors down to 8. And just for ease of use and for the fewer number of stitch colors and so on, we're going to remove a few of these. We always need white, so that will stay. We need black for the outline, yellow for the center, so these 3 will stay. I'm going to go with the lightest blue for the petals, but all these other blues we're going to remove. Alright, so now we're down to 4 colors, and we'll click Next. Now this is the frame where we determine how wide an area will default to fill or column stitching. So if you look over here on the right hand side, anything that's less than 9 millimeters will be a satin stitch or a column stitch, and anything greater is going to be a fill stitch. This is the standard, and I think that'll work for this design, so we'll just click Next. And now Autopunch has delivered the image in blocks. And over here we see that stitch blocks that have the same color as the background is selected, but we don't want any white blocks, so I'm going to uncheck that. And we can see that the preview window is showing, but it's in our way, so I'm going to uncheck that. And now we can take a look at the blocks, and it looks like we have the center and the petals and the outline. Now this is a little strange because this is the actual stitching order, and we of course wouldn't do the outline first. So we'll rearrange that in a minute, but the very first thing we need to consider is whether there's anything here that doesn't belong. Sometimes you have a few surprises, and this is where you can actually remove any of those things that surprise you in the digitized design. But we don't see anything here that doesn't belong. If we click Preview again, we can see what each block is. This is this petal, and this is this petal, and so on. So everything belongs. So I'm going to uncheck that once again. All right. Now, in this step number 2, we can actually change the stitching sequence. And this is where we can move this outline down to the bottom of the design, because it's the last thing that we should stitch. So we've moved it to the end here. And this is where we need to consider whether we want to do the center first or if we want it to be after we stitch all the petals. And I think in this case after the petals is fine, so we'll click Next. and move on. Now we need to set our fabric selection. This is important because the design, if we don't choose the proper fabric for the design, it may not stitch out properly. It may have puckering and some other issues. So I think a woven fabric, a light woven, would be best. So I'm going to look over this preset list and, for example, see a polo style shirt is a knit. And a sweatshirt is kind of stretchy too, so we wouldn't want to choose any of those things. But maybe something like a tablecloth or a pillowcase would be a light woven. Let's choose a tablecloth. Yes, it's a light woven, so that's the type of fabric that we want to stitch the flower on. And Autopunch tells us to use a light tearaway and a sharp needle, so we'll click OK. And now we can define what each of the individual blocks will be stitched as. So let's click on them and we'll see again our preview window where that block is. We want this petal to be a fill, and we want this petal to be a fill. And we just want to check going down the groups. Oh, now here's one that came up as a column. And so you see we want all of our petals to stitch the same, so I'm going to change that to fill and fill. And here's another one that popped up as a column, so we want to change it to fill, fill, fill. We want the center to be a fill, and we want the outline to stitch as a satin stitch or a column stitch. All right, so those are all lined up. Now, because we're working on a woven and we're using a fill stitch, we might want to consider changing our density a little bit. But one thing for sure that we want to consider is an underlay, because the underlay can help prevent those little see-through areas where the background fabric peeks through. So we're going to click on our blocks again, and we're going to be sure that they each have a fill underlay. We don't want an edge walk underlay because that's better with an outline stitch. And we'll get to that in a minute, but we're going to put in a fill underlay on each one of these blocks. All right, a couple more here. And we'll do the same thing with our center. And then finally, when we click on our outline, we want to have an edge walk underlay. So now we'll click next. And we want to have, sorry, that's my cat. Now we want to click jump stitch between the blocks and finish. And let's take a look at what our design looks like. The first thing I'm going to do is select a small hoop and enlarge it slightly so we can see it up close. And it looks pretty good. So one thing, if you have editor, this is where you can go in and do a little bit of editing to your design. And one thing that might make this interesting is to edit the center a little bit. So I'm going to click on my editor and design and go to my settings. And I'm going to change the stitch type from a step satin fill to, let's see, a step angle. All right, and I'll click apply. And let's take a look at the realistic view, and that looks really good. I like the interest that's created there, but I might want to change the angle just a bit. In fact, let's go on up to about 75 and click apply. And yes, that looks very nice. I like the angle and I like the interest created by changing that fill out just a little bit. So we're going to click stitch it and we'll click that off. And now we're ready to save our design or to stitch it out. Now that wasn't too difficult, was it? So Autopunch is really a software that's designed for home users. It's not for commercial use. It's not designed for a heavy output. Neither is your machine, by the way. But it does have a low price tag, and it simplifies a difficult process of digitizing. And it offers most of the common features of all embroidery software. But the key is understanding the process of how it works in order to produce superior results. So what's the difference in all the different software then? Well, it's pretty much a matter of preference. You know how it is. There are people with all different lifestyles. Some people prefer to eat early. That's the way we live. But some people prefer to eat later. It's a lifestyle preference. Both types of people get fed. So you don't want to spend your time comparing your purchase to others. Just learn all the options that you have available to you. And just with Autopunch, there are other packages that you can add on. Some of your machines come with all of the software, Hyperfont and PhotoStitch and whatnot. But if you've just purchased Autopunch, you might want to look into some of the other packages that you can purchase to add functionality. There are many different ways that you can arrive at the same destination, and so that's what we're aiming to learn. And to be honest with you, I belong to some other groups, and I really get tired of hearing people complain about Futura and Autopunch and Singer in general. I think, this is just my opinion, but I think that complaints sometimes reflect poorly on the complainer. I always think about driving a car, and you wouldn't want to operate a car without learning all the buttons and how everything operates. Everything is different. For a while, my husband and I had two of the exact same cars, just different years. And it's funny how all the buttons were the opposite of each other. Things that were on one side of the dashboard were on the other side of the dashboard, and so forth. So in your software, I highly recommend that you examine everything. Click on the tabs, find out what they're for, read your owner's manual. And frankly, I don't think you should try to compare because it's impossible for you to know how other digitizing software works. You couldn't buy every single package that's out there, so just forget it. But before we leave this topic, I just want to point out that there is a fantastic chart comparing embroidery software. It's found on Wikipedia, and I've included a screenshot of it. The chart is far too long to post here, but if you just look at this for a minute, you can see Autopunch, and you can see how it compares to some other software that's listed here, like Bernina's software, for example, and a few other types. But there are many, many brands compared on this chart, and they all compare favorably. About the biggest difference in all of them is the price. And Autopunch is a very reasonable price, whereas some of the other software can cost thousands of dollars. And that alone is good enough for me. So I will continue to work with it and try to find out a way to do the things that I want to do. And I think I'm happy with it, and I hope you are too. It might help if you think about Windows software. If you're like me, then we're of the generation that was around before Windows was part of computers. In fact, believe it or not, you younger people, home computers were available long before you had Windows operating system. And what you did with your computer was simply a matter of learning keyboard commands, and you had to memorize them. That was really difficult. But adding Windows software allowed us to easily do amazing things. And many people failed to learn all the ways that Windows worked, and then they became frustrated. And I hear all the time, even today, people saying, stupid computer, or my computer doesn't like me. And really, those are just comments that mean user error. So let me get down off my bandwagon and let's get back to the magic of Autopunch. Magic happens when you choose a just right image to digitize. Magic happens when you crop that image well and set realistic dimensions for your final design. Magic happens when you reduce your colors appropriately, when you classify your blocks, when you customize your work, and when you edit repeatedly. Yes, when you edit repeatedly. Um, and you want to take advantage of features like the realistic view, or do a trial stitch, or reorder your blocks. Try different things and edit again, and don't be discouraged if your design doesn't work. There are so many images available. If you try a butterfly and you're not happy with it after several efforts, go out and get another one. Do you know of a best-selling novel that was not edited? Of course not, because the secret to good writing, writing a bestseller, is editing. Some really well-known and best-selling authors will admit to having edited countless times, maybe hundreds. And then once they have edited their work and it goes to an editor, the editors will look at it and demand additional edits. So then it goes round and round again. And embroidery designs are exactly the same. You're going to need to edit your work, maybe not hundreds of times, but you're going to have to put some editing effort into that design to get your best result. Autopunch is fantastic, but you have to be in control and set some parameters and edit your work. So what's the takeaway this week? Well, if you go back to that little example about Windows, what Windows operating system did was allow someone who basically had no computer programming knowledge to operate a home computer. And what Autopunch does is the same thing. It allows someone without much drawing and digitizing training to create beautiful designs. But you have to think of your designs as a rough draft that's going to need some editing to become a bestseller. The connection between the two is that you need to learn all the ways that Autopunch works. And don't blame the software for something that's really user error. So you have a little assignment this week, and that assignment is to go out and play with Autopunch. Click on all the tabs. Read your user manual. Notice the tags that pop up when you click on something. Use your help key. Experiment with a design by changing the settings, and then share your findings with the group. Have a great week.